the public hearing for this ordinance will be on October 24th, 2016. We just love seeing you every meeting.
Can I just comment that the number of Shade Tree people has been dwindling at these meetings? Is it? Janet, you get a prize, and Victoria.
I think we started with 75 people, and now we're like with 5.
And then, just while you're still here, we have on the agenda under resolutions a student recognition award, and are any of the students here?
No, they're all college students.
Okay, they are. Okay, that's fine. So then we'll keep with the order then. I was going to try to give them a little bit of a break, but and move them up. But
perhaps maybe in January when they might be home on winter break, we could have a I don't know if
definitely.
Something.
Okay.
Whatever. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you so much. All right, we'll see you in the next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll move on to the next work session, which is the Streetscape Design Standards for Nassau Street, and I'd like to welcome up Deanna Stockton and Jim Constantine. And just while they're getting set up, I think Council has been kept up to date on this, but this is an initiative. There's been a group, including Councilwoman Butler, who I think just stepped out, and myself and Deanna, members of the Merchants Association, Princeton University, and Mr. DeShield have been meeting over the past several months. There was a big public meeting at the Garden Theater looking at Nassau Street. I'll turn it over to Jim.
I have a couple questions just before we begin. Is this identical to the report that's on the website, or is this a presentation?
This is an abbreviated presentation.
Okay, so I guess I have 2 requests. One, for the minutes, can we have the presentation itself, and also the current version of the report? And the reason I asked that is because the link that's actually in our agenda packet didn't work. I had to go find it on the website, which I knew how to do. I don't know if the public knows how to do that, or if it's hanging off of a page I didn't find. Like, is it on the planning page or the engineering page?
It's on the front page of the website.
It's on the front page of the website. We had...
okay, I didn't see it there.
Unfortunately, we changed the document between when
yes, I saw
did
that.
the agenda and when it was posted to the website. I'm sorry for that. But we will get Kathy the updated versions of both the document and the presentation.
Thank you.
Yes. And we'll do it in a in a PDF, because I'm noticing that the PowerPoint fonts aren't equating, so there'll be a couple of words off. So anyway, this is a set of standards that really try to enhance the appearance, safety, and the pedestrian-friendly experience along Nassau Street, recognizing that there's a real cultural and historic significance to Princeton's Main Street. Or we can also say this is how we can create better public space on Nassau Street. So the number of standards or the items in the streetscape elements are shown on the screen here, and they're wide-ranging. I'm not going to try to touch on all of those tonight, but this is really establishing a palette of materials and a design vocabulary for those materials. It's not a plan, so it doesn't say specifically this should happen on this block. That would be something that would be done in implementation, block by block, and in some cases property by property once you adopt this. So this gave us a chance to, one, look at existing conditions, and we have some 30-year wear on our existing, or I guess last full streetscape improvements on the core blocks of Nassau Street. And there are issues related to the fact that they're a diagonal pattern, trying to replace sewer laterals. You end up getting the sort of checkerboarding effect that you see in the image on the left. We also know that some of the beautiful granite curbs that surround the tree wells that also flare with the diagonal have really started to be moved both by the tree roots and other wear and tear. And so there's lots of existing maintenance issues that can be reassessed at this time. It's also an opportunity to reflect on things that may have been taken for granted, existed for a long time, but have never been analyzed previously. For instance, the amount of space that's used on Nassau Street for the edges of tree wells, which really aren't benefiting the roots, or the areas for car doors to open, or where bicycles end up being parked in large spots. So it's a chance to sort of reassess these things, try to eliminate some conflicts. We've organized the streetscape into really two basic zones. One are the 16 feet and greater streetscapes, and you can see in the diagram there's an orange area, the throughway zone, that's really the primary pedestrian passage area, and then in green what we call the furnishing zone, which really consists of the street trees and tree wells, the street furniture, the ability that you'll see here, even for cafe seating. It's where benches have always existed. So if we look at one of the options that's actually was tested during the June, I think it was June 18th public open house, was the idea of turning seats 90 degrees, benches 90 degrees, and creating social groupings where benches can face one another. And this is sort of a tactical urbanism, real life, test it out, kick the tires, give us your feedback. And to be blunt, people love this arrangement, and we got a clear endorsement. You also experience the streetscape differently, because now you're sitting perpendicular to the street. You can see down the street. You can see architecture differently. I think it's very similar to the experience people had with the parklet demonstration when they experienced the whole street life in a different way. So this really certainly gave us a chance to make better public space with benches. And that actually becomes one of the standards that's in the package, not just turning two benches to their sides, but also the ability for three bench groupings. Obviously, it needs to be coordinated with areas for car doors to open. In many cases, it's actually easier if you look at the photo there. I mean, a car door can open and people can walk right between the benches, so you don't need to necessarily dedicate space only to that movement. The other thing that came out of our open house and sort of testing ideas was the opportunity to put dining or allow dining in a number of different ways. One is along the storefront where it's allowed today, but also allowing it to move into this furnishing zone for some of the same reasons that the benches can be turned. And if we look at this existing scene, looking down in front of Starbucks, you can actually see on the right behind the bench just how much excess space is totally dedicated for car doors to open and people to get in and out of cars. And so recapturing that, here is an after view where you can see, one, that the through movement zone is paved in one treatment, so that's the throughway zone, the primary path, and then the furnishing zone uses a slightly different textured paving so that it's actually differentiated visually and texturally. And this one actually illustrates both cafe seating along the storefront as well as along the curb, which the standards are suggesting is an option. There wasn't as overwhelming a public support directly for that, but there was a majority support to looking at both types of seating. So one of the opportunities by placing cafe seating in the furnishing zone is it can allow for more throughway traffic. We'll see that on the narrower streetscape. Or sidewalk condition. So if we look at the actual pavement treatments that are recommended, one is, if I go back again just to the photo, in the through zone, a larger, first of all, going to a 90-degree geometry and using a paving stone, the London paver. They're typically about 1 foot by a foot and a half or 2 feet across. There's an example of them that you can find in different parts of Palmer Square, and then a finer grain brick-type paver in the furnishing zone to give it more texture and more detail. There are some cost implications with this. If we look at standard concrete, which is in the top bar here, if you do it at 90 degrees, which is not what Nassau Street in the downtown has, it's about $10 a square foot. As soon as you turn concrete into a 45-degree pattern, you're up to about $14 a square foot. The durability and maintenance, the life cycle of that is about 20 to 30 years. That's the range that you're in right now, and you can see what's happening on Nassau Street. There's places on Nassau Street where we have things that are probably decades beyond that, but you can see what happens with the wear. When you go to the pavers, the London pavers in the second line, you go to $19 a square foot, so it's about 1/3 more than the diagonal concrete poured-in-place paving, but the life cycle goes up to about 40 years. So you get an increased durability. The other thing that happens in terms of maintenance is you shouldn't get the checkerboarding that we get with the sewer lateral and water lateral and other infrastructure repairs and maintenance, because you can pick up paving stones, replace the line, put it back. What happens now is you start trying to re-pour a checkerboard pattern of the poured-in-place concrete, and you can never get the perfect match. And then it's a similar cost, just slightly higher with the brick pavers. So the long and the short is it's a more expensive material to install, but it lasts longer, and it should maintain at a much higher level. And that's, in fact, why you see the university using it more and more on the walkways throughout the campus. Let's go to the less than 16-foot wide sidewalks. So again, we have in orange the throughway zone, in green the furnishing zone, and again, one of the recommendations is to actually consider moving cafe seating curbside within this zone, and that's probably easily seen here. And one of the things that we noted is that when you actually have some of the benches and trash receptacles in front of some of the eating establishments today, they often become sort of dominated by the patrons of the food establishment, and the benches really cease to be public benches, and it really becomes sort of seating related to the establishment. So if you were to apply that standard here, looking down towards CVS on a narrower section of the street, you see the through zone and its London pavers, you see the texture paved furnishing zone to the right, and you see the ability for cafe tables and then sort of moving benches to elsewhere in the streetscape. When you get into the narrower streetscape, you do have to have the benches typically parallel the curb as they do today. So it's an opportunity. You would have to look at some adjustments to your ordinance or your licensing agreement related to where folks are allowed to put cafe tables. But what happens if you look at that through zone, if you would imagine under the orange awning there, if somebody were to place tables in the storefront, you block some of that passageway, the pedestrian primary passageway in the through zone. So those are the trade-offs. We believe that in the narrower sections of the street, putting those cafe tables in the furnishing zone with an agreement for maintenance by the food establishment. This is not necessarily waiter service, but it's a way of trying to get them to maintain, which in many cases out on the benches and the trash receptacles, it's sort of a free-for-all situation today. One other thing that's shown in that simulation I just had up is around that existing tree you can see some cobblestones, and those are really intended as one of the alternate treatments for tree wells where you have larger existing trees. You can set them in. You don't want to you want to be very sensitive to the root structure, and then further down the street there are actually metal tree grates, and we again did some testing of this in the open house, had some feedback from the public, and so the standards represent both the ability to use the iron grate tree wells, which, by the way, you can walk on, you can sort of get more usability out of the public space from those. There's definitely a cost associated with those because they're about $800 to $1,450 per tree well, and you do cut them and basically allow the tree to grow over time. And you can cut rings out successfully and allow the tree to mature. So those are the two standards that are basically proposed that would work in terms of design vocabulary with the rest. Traffic signals, trying to look at ways to move towards the darkened or the black stanchions like you have actually occurring right now at Van Deventer, Washington, placed in place. Utility and electrical cabinets, also getting those to that black color. We were hoping to suggest moving street signs to a black color, although I think I'm going to be in a community tomorrow morning, and I will check because I'm pretty sure they do have black street signs along a state highway, but through some good research we found out that actually brown was the only color that we could use. Black was not permissible under the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. However, the basic idea is to move away from highway the highway design palette that we have as a state highway, with the aluminum posts, the green signs, to try to do things that feel like they're more compatible with a Main Street design vocabulary. So that's part of the visual cues to make a more pedestrian-friendly environment. And how those can be applied in a composite, we have a simulation here at the Witherspoon intersection showing the standard for the ladder crosswalk. Now this is an extended ladder crosswalk made even wider, and it also shows the potential optional treatment of actually doing a intersection tattoo or a colorized pavement or surface treatment over the pavement within the intersection. So there's the condition today, and then here is the after view. So you can see, let's go back again, you can see what it is today. Part of this needs to be coordinated carefully with the handicap ramps, but the idea is to really, particularly on this crossing, to provide more pedestrian space. People tend to walk outside the crosswalks regularly, trying to accommodate that better, make it more visual for the drivers, what's happening. And also you see the black mast arms and the ability for banners, which were recently approved at Palmer Square, up on the street lights as well, which can help scale the space down a little better. Okay, moving to traffic and pedestrian signage. Again, the idea is to try to come up with or try to take the existing, consolidate the signage clutter and place it on a black pole that's using the same design vocabulary as the street lamps. And then we also introduced a way to accommodate some wayfinding. So again, if we look at the existing condition, you can see that signage clutter over on the right on different posts, different conditions, and here it is consolidated onto that single black pole. This also marries two things that we were asked to look at. One is Palmer Square has some recently approved new parking directional signage, and that is it there, the green P with the arrow. And we were also asked to look at the university's new wayfinding systems, which are very simple black placards attached to posts, and you see those there, which can, that sign says Library, Heinz Plaza, Arts Council. Just, it can be general landmarks. I know there's some interest as well from the merchants to try to, in some cases, provide some wayfinding for merchants. This is really just addressing landmarks in the downtown. Bicycles. We again got, during our public open house, huge support for bicycle corrals, and this really reinforces some of the transformation to a complete street with bicycle infrastructure that your bicycle master plan is attempting to do, and it also can recapture enormous amounts of sidewalk space that's right now just cluttered with bicycles up on it. It also reinforces for bicyclists generally ride in the street, park in the corrals, and the corrals are obviously a standard. You see in the bottom there's something from the New York City DOT. They're rolling out in communities throughout the world as basically sort of a more ideal way to try to handle bicycle parking. They can be primarily directed to no parking locations like you see in the image above, and just to show you where that is, at John Street Alley. So if you look at the far corner, there is that bicycle corral placed down there. You can also add some colored surface treatment to it to make it stand out, suggest a couple of planters in addition to the typical stanchions. You can snowplow through there. Public Works has tested these. They'll make it through the plow test. And that's how they would take place. And there's lots of opportunities to do that, not just on Nassau, on side streets. There's one other thing we're illustrating here, which is what we call an alley treatment, and I'm just going to go back to the existing conditions. So at John Street, Bank Street, and Tulane Street, this is a condition which, well, one is, I think there's the highest number of pedestrian vehicle strikes on pedestrians at Tulane, which is sort of confounding at first because it's a very narrow crossing, but we believe that motorists, to get into that narrow aperture, tend to actually, in some cases, drive a little fast crossing traffic to get in, because in most cases you would expect to have higher pedestrian safety with narrower crossings. So what this would do, if you watch the simulation, is it would continue the grade of the sidewalk across the opening at these conditions and then use a tightly spaced cobblestone treatment, smooth finish. It is bikeable, which is important. We did hear that from some of the bicycle advocates. And it's very similar to what the university has installed with the speed ramp or the speed table at the Dinky station, where they have a texture paving on the ramp and the ability to sort of walk out flush from the sidewalk when you would cross to the new Arts Center. So that's what's proposed there, and there would be some sort of tactile and visual warning on the sidewalk that you're crossing a place that cars might go. Certainly going to slow vehicles when they're crossing this location, and I think this was recently even rolled out in a meeting with the Bank Street residents to some support. So last couple of items. There is a First Amendment right for these little newsstands to be out in the public space, but it is public space, and so we're suggesting that they be consolidated into integral cabinets. They do come with a price tag on them, and I know that there's some legal issues in terms of how you handle toggling them in, but certainly has been the situation used in many communities. And again, if we just go back, sort of the analysis of this is, your public space is basically being, taken over by these little rascals. So that's the solution. Those boxes can range $1,800 for a 4-box cabinet, $2,500 for a 6-box cabinet. Think about them over decades and the ability to recapture public space for the use of citizens. So there is an investment to control them and relocate them. And then lastly, we have a special condition in a few places at the kiosk, which you see pictured here, at the Garden Theater, and even between Sovereign Bank and the Bank of Princeton, where we have plazas that meet Nassau Street. And so one of the options that's shown is the ability for the street, the sidewalk paving to actually continue back into the plaza area, or to allow the plaza to come out to the sidewalk, however you want to see it. This one also shows the proposed bus shelter at this location. So it's a way that the sidewalk space basically can extend in and sort of use the plaza space in a more integral way. And so that's, again, an option that's contained in the standards. And that's it. Summary.
Thank you so much. I had a question, actually. This is something that came up in passing at one of the initial meetings, but you were talking about how some towns had taken essentially control back of their sidewalks from the state on state highways, and I was do you remember this conversation? I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more, because one of the complications with Nassau Street is because it's a state highway, we have to go through the state with whatever we want to do. So how would something like that work, where we would retain more control over it, and does that impact if we want to try to get state funding to help with some of these improvements?
Right. You can negotiate different jurisdictional arrangements. So that is actually in a New Jersey DOT publication that was produced by the Voorhees Transportation Center at Rutgers. And actually, as you went through, it was about how to deal with state highways that are main streets. And actually, local jurisdiction turned out to be one of the tools that was most used in the case studies in New Jersey of communities trying to deal with exactly. My sense from having helped another couple of communities on this is there's a range of latitude of negotiation that you can undertake with the state. So if you want to get them to keep those expensive pipes under the pavement, you can probably do that. And if you're willing to take on, this is what I've heard several of the Department of Transportation officials speak to, if you're willing to take the surface and you want to treat it differently and maintain it, then you've got the surface, and perhaps they'll keep the underlying infrastructure. But it appears that there's multiple negotiated arrangements in these kind of shared jurisdictional agreements.
Well, I think we have the added complication that we also have a historic district at the state level to deal with, right? This would be SHPO's jurisdiction as well, right? The Kings Highway?
But I would think that most of the other main streets might have similar issues. Right?
Yeah, I just don't see SHPO delegating back to local control, even if DOT does.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Lieberman?
Yeah, thank you. Very nice presentation, and I love the enhancements. I wish that you could be like I Dream a Genie and just blink or something and have that happen. One item, the furnishings that are outside near the street where people, the furnishing lane where people could sit in their different tables and seats near the street. I was outside of Wee Haven this weekend, and it was kind of funny because their benches in front of them were full of people eating, I guess, chicken cheesesteaks and whatever else they were eating, souvlaki's, whatever they're eating. Whatever they're eating, you know. And then, so 3 people went over to the Chinese restaurant next door and sat down on their furniture to eat their sandwiches. And they came out of the Chinese restaurant like, "Get out of here! You know, this isn't your food, this isn't our food, this is their food. Get out of here." You know, not that, you know, they shouldn't have done that, but I can see when you say that, will it be the furnishings that, if it happens, like who would be responsible, and, you know, whose jurisdiction will it be? I mean, who could sit there? I just can see a lot of, when I saw that problem, I'm like, oh my God, you know, if it's not your food in front of your place, you have to move on. Is that an issue that you ever thought about coming up with? And the other issue, truck idling. A lot of times trucks will idle for periods of time on the sides of those streets that you mentioned while they're unloading and loading, and I can see 20 minutes with diesel in your face might kind of kill you here.
Yeah.
So, but I'm just saying those are just a few issues that throw out there at you.
Mr. Simon?
I also want to thank you for the work you've done, and the presentation's beautiful. The thing that's holding me back from getting enthusiastic about it is I don't know how to go from the presentation of design standards, which looks like a wish list, to a plan where I understand the cost, because it makes it, I mean, it's not going to be free, and I don't know whether to think of it in terms of, you know, $300,000 or $3 million, or the sky's the limit, right? And that makes a big difference to me in terms of how enthusiastic I want to be about the plan. So how do we get from where we're at with the standards and the work you've done up to this point, and a plan that we can implement, and we can be confident we have some idea of the range of costs involved?
Well, it's a nice segue because we are planning to come back to council at the next meeting with a grant application. There is a federal transportation alternatives grant program where they do provide funding for streetscape projects. And so we would be looking to submit an application. We haven't quite defined our limits yet, but it's definitely Van Dievender is one end of the project, and we may go all the way to Bayard Lane on the town side of Nassau Street. We've got great opportunities to re-envision the tree areas because we do have so many missing trees in that stretch. So we are putting together a cost estimate and information to go along with that grant that we can report on at the next meeting. Of course, there's the surfacing topics that we can estimate, but then there are other pieces that may be a point of discussion regarding the landscaping. Do we provide irrigation for the landscaping instead of having Public Works coming through with their water buffalo trucks and dumping a gallon of water on plantings every week? Or, you know, if we are extending our green space, that also would lend itself more to providing irrigation. Just different topics like that that would play into a cost of the project as we move through a design process. But we can definitely give you a range of costs depending on what improvements would be incorporated.
Anything else? Ms. Butler?
Is this I know you've been to the Merchants Association with this, but is this the public presentation of this? This is it? I was under the impression there was going to be there were going to be multiple chances for input. The people who participated back in June, I think, were expecting something else besides this. Is that not happening?
We've gotten into a time crunch with this grant application, and I think we can definitely have another public meeting. We did attend the Merchants Association, gave a very, very brief overview of the Streetscape project, provided them with the link to the design guidelines on the website. But we could definitely follow up with a public meeting to get a wider input from the general public.
I feel like we told people who participated that there would be kind of a presentation and a chance to see what the results were of the various surveys that we took.
Right. I think at this point we probably would look to do it early next year. I think between the holidays, all the holidays coming up, it may be worthwhile to...
In the meantime, do we have an mailing list? Do we have a sign-up sheet? Because I remember people were signing up, and maybe to just send out a blast email to everybody with the link to the presentation from tonight, and also the fuller link that's on the website, so at least they can look at the pictures online.
We can do that.
And I mean, that can be done probably this week.
Two small detail items that just from other committees, et cetera. One is the brown background on the street signs. We've had some discussion on that, as Ms. Stockton knows, and we've encouraged historic preservation to look at adding the name of the historic district in some way into the sign. So just so you're aware of that, that's something the Public Works Committee has done. That's for the colleagues here to know as well. And if people are concerned about that or don't agree with that, I guess we should talk about it. But that's the feeling of the members of the Public Works Committee was that most members of the public are not going to know that a brown background simply means historic preservation or historic district, right? So, and we do want to be proud about our historic districts and announce them. So, some way to do that. So that's one. And the other was just very recently, probably after your report was written, the state turned down our application on that bus shelter. Yes, so the green roof, the SHPO turned it down, the Historic Preservation Organization. So we're sorting out what to do next, right? I mean, we haven't, or have you already worked through that? But that's, last I knew, we had withdrawn our application.
Right, correct. We have withdrawn the application. The staff at State Historic Preservation would not support a green roof on the bus shelter. They did not feel that it was in keeping with the historic district. So if we opt to move ahead with that, they indicated that the application would have to go to a regularly scheduled Historic Sites Council meeting, at which point there would be a full public hearing on whether or not it could be approved. And so at this point, I asked them to withdraw the application, and we would make a determination as to whether or not we wanted to move forward with the green roof or switch over to a standing seam type roof, which is what they recommend. There was also some question about the solar panel to provide the photovoltaic lighting in the shelter. And I've sent over follow-up photographs to the State Historic Office to get feedback on if that is also a concern or if it's more the green roof. So as I get more information together, I'll be working with LRK to see what our options are.
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to second Mr. Simon's point about letting people know what historic district they're in, because in all the discussions about the Witherspoon-Jackson Historic District, I think one of the more shocking things was this was our 20th historic district, and I think we could pull anybody off the street, and I don't think you'd find anybody who could name all 20. And it's just a shame, because I think people would love to know that they're standing in a historic district, and especially Nassau Street, where we have so many visitors. I think it just enhances the experience for everybody to know what the name of the historic district is and that you're in one. So, and then if I can be of any help with the, this keeps turning off, with the cool bus shelter.
The green bus shelter.
Yeah.
We will let you know.
We could be in touch later. Is there anybody else? Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Did you have something?
No,
Okay.
no, I was going to say that Bob Kaiser is probably screaming in his retirement time off because he really wanted that bus shelter.
He did. We're going to get the bus shelter.
Yeah, I don't think they've turned down the concept of a bus shelter there. It's just whether or not it can have a green roof and maybe the photovoltaic cells, right?
Correct.
What's a green roof?
That was the point of the bus shelter, was for it to be souped up.
Unless you're waiting for the bus and it's
Well,
raining.
but even, I
Debate
mean,
about that, actually.
no, I mean, there's, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And now we move on to the second ordinance introduction.